What if the greatest heroes of humanity became its deadliest enemies? In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where stars burn like the fires of forgotten worlds, humanity once stood united under the guiding hand of the Emperor, a being of unmatched vision and ambition. For millennia, his light promised order, progress, and the dream of a perfect Imperium, a civilization unchallenged by time, by war, or by the darkness that lurked beyond the void. Yet, even in the brightest light, shadows gather, and some of the most luminous stars are destined to fall. Horus Lupercal, the favored son, the Warmaster, the pride of the Emperor's legions, once carried with him the promise of glory and loyalty. Yet in the hidden corners of the galaxy, whispers of doubt slithered through his mind like serpents, subtle and insidious. Ambition, fear, and envy are small things when compared to destiny, but what happens when destiny itself is manipulated? When the seeds of betrayal are planted in the heart of the one chosen to lead, no fortress, no fleet, and no amount of bloodshed can undo the inevitability of ruin. The galaxy, vast and glittering, was about to experience the horror of a betrayal so profound that entire legions of brothers would raise arms against each other, spilling the blood of heroes, of innocents, and of those who had once sworn unbreakable oaths. The Horus Heresy was coming, and with it, a grim reality, that even in a galaxy built on the promise of perfection, chaos waits patiently in the wings, and no loyalty is beyond corruption. It is here, in this moment, at the edge of light and shadow, that the story begins. Not with a battle, not with a proclamation, but with a question that will haunt every heart in the galaxy: when those we trust most become our enemies, what hope remains? Before the shadows fell, before betrayal seeped into the hearts of men, there was the Imperium at the height of its power, a galaxy-spanning empire united under the Emperor's vision. Planets gleamed with industry, fleets cut through the void like silver blades, and humanity's colonies stretched to the edges of known space. This was an age of triumph, of discipline and purpose, where every citizen, soldier, and leader believed in something greater than themselves. The Imperium was more than a government, it was a symbol, a promise that humanity could rise above the chaos of the cosmos and carve its destiny among the stars. At the heart of this grandeur were the Primarchs, the Emperor's superhuman sons, each crafted for war, wisdom, and leadership. These were not merely warriors, they were legends in the making. Horus, proud and charismatic, inspired loyalty like a sun radiates warmth. Leman Russ, fierce and untamed, struck fear into the hearts of enemies. Sanguinius, angelic and noble, carried a presence that demanded reverence. And there were many more, each a paragon of the Emperor's design, each a beacon of hope for billions. They were humanity's champions, forged to lead entire legions across the stars, to bring order and stability where chaos had always threatened to rise. Yet even amidst this brilliance, a delicate balance held the Imperium together. Rivalries simmered beneath the surface, friendly competitions that shaped strategy and strength, but also planted seeds of doubt. Pride whispered in the ears of even the greatest, reminding them of their power and their importance. For the first time, the galaxy felt invincible, untouchable. It was an empire where faith, loyalty, and destiny intertwined, creating a golden age. And yet, it is in the brilliance of this age that the shadows found their first cracks, the faintest fractures that would, in time, widen into chasms of betrayal. For now, the Imperium stood tall, unshaken, and eternal, or so it seemed. But as Horus looked upon his brothers and the vast empire he was sworn to serve, a subtle question lingered, unspoken yet persistent: can even perfection survive when ambition and doubt whisper together in the dark? Even in the brightest light, shadows can creep unnoticed, and in the hearts of heroes, doubt can take root like a silent poison. Horus Lupercal, once the Emperor's most loyal son, began to feel a restlessness he could neither name nor resist. It started as a whisper in the quiet moments between victories, a question that lingered longer than it should: am I truly serving the greater good, or merely the will of one who claims to know all? Such thoughts, harmless at first, became the fertile soil in which the seeds of betrayal could grow. The galaxy beyond the Imperium's shining walls was not empty, it was a place of shadows, where dark gods and nameless horrors lurked in the warp. These entities, ancient and patient, sensed the tremor of doubt in Horus' heart. They offered visions of power, glory, and freedom from the constraints of loyalty, not as a single, loud promise, but as subtle, seductive suggestions that lingered just at the edge of thought. With every victory in the Emperor's name, with every legion raised in his honor, Horus began to feel the weight of expectation pressing on him. Was he a son, a servant, or a god-made instrument meant to be sacrificed for a vision that might never be his own? Around him, cracks began to appear in the perfection of the Imperium. Rivalries among the Primarchs grew sharper, old jealousies surfaced, and even the most loyal warriors began to question orders that demanded total obedience. Chaos did not rush in with fire and sword, it whispered, nudged, and showed glimpses of what could be, exploiting ambition and fear with surgical precision. The corruption was subtle, almost invisible, yet its effects were profound. The bond between Horus and the Emperor, once unbreakable, now trembled under the strain of unseen forces. And so, the first threads of treachery wove themselves into the fabric of the Imperium. No one noticed, or perhaps no one dared acknowledge, that the Warmaster's heart was no longer solely his own. The galaxy continued to shine in triumph and unity, unaware that its greatest hero was standing on the precipice of ruin, and that the shadow of betrayal was growing, silent but inevitable, ready to plunge all into a darkness that even the brightest light could not pierce. The whispers grew louder, no longer confined to shadows and fleeting doubts. Horus Lupercal, the Emperor's most trusted son, now faced visions of power that promised freedom from the chains of loyalty and the weight of expectation. Chaos did not approach him with force, it came as temptation, as revelation, as a mirror reflecting everything he desired and feared. Each vision hinted at a galaxy reshaped not by command but by will, not by obedience but by strength. It was intoxicating, and the Warmaster, proud and ambitious, could not turn away. At first, Horus resisted, recalling the oath sworn to his father, to his brothers, and to the Imperium itself. But resistance is fragile in the face of persistent seduction. Chaos revealed the hypocrisy hidden beneath the Imperium's golden facade, countless worlds left to decay, lives sacrificed without meaning, heroes forced to serve a vision they did not understand. The corruption did not call him a traitor, it framed itself as clarity, as liberation from blind obedience. With every promise of power came the subtle erosion of conscience, a shift so small it was almost imperceptible, yet so profound it would change the course of history. Horus began to see his brothers not as comrades, but as rivals, instruments of a vision that denied him agency. Loyalty, once a sacred bond, now felt like chains. The Emperor's command, once a guiding light, now seemed a cage. Chaos painted a world where Horus' own will could shape destiny, where glory could be won through decisive action rather than blind obedience. And in the quiet, where doubt had once whispered, temptation now roared, demanding choice, demanding defiance, demanding betrayal. The galaxy had not yet fallen, but Horus had already begun his descent. Every triumph, every loyalist victory, every act of obedience became a weight pressing upon him, pushing him closer to the edge. The Warmaster, the pride of the Emperor, was no longer untouchable. The seduction was complete, and the first irreversible step toward the Horus Heresy had been taken. The seeds of rebellion, carefully nurtured by darkness, had been sown, and the galaxy, unknowingly, was about to reap the consequences. Betrayal, once conceived, cannot remain hidden forever. Horus, now fully ensnared by the whispers of chaos, began to move with calculated subtlety. The first acts were small, almost imperceptible commands delayed, strategies altered, loyalties tested. To the untrained eye, everything appeared normal, yet the cracks in the Imperium's foundation were widening. The seeds sown in the shadows of doubt had begun to bear fruit, and the galaxy teetered on the edge of an abyss it could not yet see. Horus' first betrayals were measured, designed to weaken without drawing immediate suspicion. Trusted lieutenants were quietly swayed, secret alliances formed in hushed tones, and subtle manipulations eroded the trust between legions. The Warmaster's charisma, once a force of unity, now became a weapon of division. Soldiers who had fought alongside one another for decades began to feel unease, their loyalty tested by invisible currents they could not name. Each decision Horus made was a step closer to the inevitable fracture, a fracture that would soon engulf the galaxy in blood. Even now, there were those who sensed the change, the faint shadow passing over a hero who had once been untouchable. Yet most were blinded by admiration, by faith, or by the simple belief that betrayal could not come from the galaxy's greatest champion. The first skirmishes, the first deaths, the first signs of rebellion were all carefully orchestrated to appear as misfortune, as coincidence, as the unpredictable chaos of war. But these were no accidents. Every choice, every misstep, every fortunate victory for the enemy was a thread in Horus' growing web of treachery. And so, the galaxy began its descent. The Warhammer 40,000 universe, once a shining testament to the Emperor's vision, had already been touched by the darkness of one man's ambition. The heresy was no longer a distant threat, it was beginning, quietly, inexorably, like a storm gathering on the horizon. And when the first legions finally turned their blades against their brothers, the galaxy would discover that the cost of betrayal is not just measured in lives but in the destruction of trust, honor, and hope itself. The whispers of betrayal were no longer confined to shadows, they had erupted into open war. Legions that had once fought side by side now faced one another with blades drawn and bolters raised, their banners stained with the blood of brothers. The galaxy trembled as the Horus Heresy shifted from subtle subversion to full-scale civil war, and the dream of a united Imperium began to crumble under the weight of betrayal and ambition. Horus' influence spread like wildfire, and the legions that followed him acted with ruthless precision. No one questioned the Warmaster's commands, for they came wrapped in the authority of one who had been revered as the Emperor's chosen. Entire worlds fell in moments, cities burned, and civilizations were razed in the name of a war that had no morality, only loyalty to a cause built on deception. Loyalist Primarchs, once confident in their purpose, were now forced to confront the unimaginable. Their brothers were not only allies, they were their enemies. The horror of brother fighting brother struck at the very heart of the Imperium. Soldiers who had trained together, shared victories, and sworn oaths of loyalty were now forced to kill one another, each death leaving a scar that could never heal. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, empires of men torn apart by ideologies and whispers of chaos. In the void between stars, massive warfleets clashed, annihilating entire worlds, yet the true devastation was far more personal, the betrayal of trust, the shattering of bonds forged over decades, and the realization that even the mightiest heroes were fallible. And amid the chaos, Horus watched with a mixture of satisfaction and purpose, believing that the galaxy could be remade in his image. Every act of rebellion, every victory over loyalist forces, was a step toward a new order, one free from the chains of the Emperor's vision. But even as his power grew, the flames of civil war consumed more than just armies, they consumed hope itself. The galaxy, vast and glorious, had become a battlefield not just of weapons and strategy, but of ideals, loyalty, and the very soul of humanity. The heart of the Imperium trembled as Horus' rebellion reached its ultimate stage. Terra, the throne world of humanity, the shining jewel of the Emperor's empire, became the focal point of the galaxy's darkest conflict. The Warmaster's forces descended upon it with relentless fury, fleets blotting out stars and armies marching to the drums of war. This was no longer a civil war of scattered battles, it was the final reckoning, the culmination of betrayal, and the galaxy's most sacred bastion now stood on the brink of annihilation. Defenders of the Imperium fought with desperation and valor that words cannot capture. Loyalist legions, ordinary soldiers, and unswerving commanders rallied to hold the Emperor's domain, knowing that failure meant not just defeat but the end of hope for all humanity. Each strike from Horus legions was calculated to break morale, to shatter unity, and to force the Imperium to its knees. The screams of the dying echoed across the hallowed halls of Terra, mingling with the metallic roar of war machines and the chants of men invoking the Emperor's name. Amid this chaos, the tragedy of the heresy was revealed in its starkest form. Brothers who had once trained, fought, and bled together were now locked in combat, each forced to reconcile loyalty to the Emperor with the horror of facing kin in battle. Cities became tombs, sanctuaries were violated, and the very foundations of Terra shook under the weight of unimaginable power. The galaxy had never known devastation like this, nor had it felt the sting of betrayal so acutely. And yet, even in the darkness, the spirit of resistance endured. Leaders and warriors who remained loyal to the Emperor refused to yield, drawing strength from faith, honor, and the knowledge that the survival of humanity rested upon their shoulders. The siege of Terra was more than a battle, it was the defining moment of the Horus Heresy, a crucible that would test loyalty, courage, and the limits of both human and superhuman resolve. In the shadow of betrayal, the galaxy waited, breathless, for the outcome that would determine its fate. War is measured not only in victories and losses, but in the quiet suffering that cannot be tallied on any battlefield report. As the Horus Heresy raged across Terra and the stars beyond, the true cost of betrayal became painfully clear. Brothers who once shared laughter, trust, and the blood of countless victories now faced each other with weapons drawn, each strike a testament to a bond forever broken. The grandeur of legions and Primarchs could not mask the despair of soldiers whose faith had been shattered, nor the cries of civilians trapped in the inferno of war. The stories of loss were endless. Entire cities reduced to ash, families torn apart, and warriors forced to commit acts they could scarcely comprehend. These were the moments that defined the heresy in human terms. Heroes who had once been celebrated as paragons of honor now found themselves questioning everything they had believed in. Loyalty, duty, and courage became double-edged swords, cutting as easily into the hearts of the faithful as into the enemies they struck. In the shadows of the battlefield, grief and horror festered, for betrayal was not an abstract concept, it was a living, breathing enemy that clawed at the soul. Even the Primarchs, towering and godlike in their power, were not immune. Sanguinius wept for the innocents slaughtered, Rogaldorn endured the agony of failed defenses, and loyal legions mourned the brothers who had succumbed to Horus' seduction. The galaxy had never witnessed such a tragic unraveling, where the very heroes of humanity became instruments of destruction. Every decision, every betrayal, was a wound upon the Imperium itself, leaving scars that would remain long after the cannons fell silent. The tragedy of betrayal was not only the fall of worlds or the deaths of millions, it was the collapse of trust, the erosion of faith, and the painful realization that even the strongest bonds can be severed by ambition and corruption. The galaxy burned, and in that fire, the human heart experienced its most profound torment. The Horus Heresy was no longer simply a war, it was an unrelenting nightmare, and its victims were both the guilty and the innocent alike. The heresy was no longer a single war, it had become a relentless storm consuming the entire galaxy. Worlds once thriving under the Emperor's protection fell one by one, their skies torn apart by orbital bombardments, their cities reduced to ash by armies of traitor legions. From the icy plains of distant forge worlds to the dense jungles of forgotten colonies, the conflict spread like a contagion, leaving devastation in its wake. Yet it was not only fire and steel that defined this war, it was the human cost, the shattering of trust, and the relentless moral erosion of those caught in its tide. Legions clashed with unholy ferocity. Loyalists fought with courage that inspired awe, yet even their victories came at staggering cost. Entire units disappeared in moments, swallowed by the overwhelming might of traitor forces or by the machinations of chaos itself. Battles that should have been simple engagements became prolonged nightmares, where strategy, honor, and survival collided with brutality and betrayal. In every corner of the galaxy, once familiar landscapes became graveyards, and every act of defiance was met with the unflinching fury of the Warmaster's will. Yet the horror of the heresy was not measured solely in numbers. Brothers slaughtered brothers, Primarchs fought Primarchs, and warriors faced impossible choices: kill or be killed, obey or betray, survive or sacrifice everything. Heroes fell, not through cowardice or incompetence, but because loyalty itself had been weaponized against them. The galaxy's vastness amplified the tragedy, turning each system into a stage for conflict that was as psychological as it was physical. Every victory was tainted, every triumph marred by loss, and every decision carried consequences that could echo across centuries. The battles across the galaxy were a testament to the scale and ruthlessness of Horus' rebellion, and yet they revealed the indomitable spirit of those who resisted. For even amidst carnage, whispers of hope persisted. Small victories, acts of courage, and the unbreakable will of the faithful showed that humanity's heart, though battered and scarred, could still endure. And as these battles raged, the stage was set for the ultimate confrontation, the moment when all that remained of the Imperium would face its greatest test, and the galaxy would discover whether light could survive the overwhelming darkness. As the heresy reached its zenith, the Imperium teetered on the edge of annihilation. Worlds had fallen, legions had fractured, and the Warmaster's reach seemed unstoppable. In this moment of near despair, the Emperor's forces turned to desperate measures, tactics, sacrifices, and gambits that would test not only their skill and courage but their very humanity. Every command, every maneuver, carried the weight of the galaxy, and failure was no longer an option, it was extinction. The loyalist Primarchs marshaled their forces, gathering every available legion, every surviving soldier, and even unlikely allies to fortify Terra and reclaim lost systems. Strategies were devised with ruthless efficiency, and yet every plan was shadowed by the realization that Horus had anticipated them, that betrayal had infiltrated even the highest levels of command. The Imperium's leaders worked tirelessly, knowing that even a moment's hesitation could cost countless lives and allow chaos to tighten its grip on the galaxy. Desperation did not weaken the defenders, it sharpened them. Heroes emerged from the wreckage, ordinary men and women performing extraordinary deeds under impossible circumstances. Fleets struck with precision, armies counterattacked with valor, and the Emperor himself moved among the faithful like a living symbol of hope. But for every victory, there was loss; for every triumph, a new setback. The galaxy became a crucible, testing courage, loyalty, and resolve on a scale never before seen, and the weight of responsibility threatened to crush even the strongest. Amid the chaos, Horus' shadow loomed larger than ever. His forces were relentless, his cunning unmatched, and his ambition limitless. The Imperium's desperate measures delayed the inevitable, but they could not erase the truth: the final confrontation was approaching, a battle that would decide the fate of humanity itself. Every strategy, every sacrifice, every act of heroism was a countdown to the moment when the galaxy would stand at the precipice, forced to witness whether the light of the Emperor could survive the storm of betrayal and the unrelenting darkness of chaos. The heart of the Imperium trembled as Horus, the Emperor's once favored son, stood before him. The air was thick with the smoke of destruction, the cries of the dying, and the oppressive weight of betrayal. Brother against brother, son against father, the galaxy had never witnessed a moment so charged with desperation and fury. Horus, towering and radiant with the power granted by chaos, met the Emperor with eyes burning with both ambition and anguish. For a fleeting moment, both seemed suspended in a silent recognition of what had been lost: the bonds of loyalty, trust, and love that had once held humanity together. The battle that followed was unlike any before. Words of reason failed, logic was drowned in the roar of engines, the clash of weapons, and the surge of supernatural power. Each strike carried the weight of millennia, the hopes of billions, and the full force of history itself. Horus fought not as a soldier, but as a god on the edge of corruption, his every action a reflection of ambition twisted by darkness. The Emperor, serene yet resolute, wielded his power with precision and mercy, unwilling to destroy what he had once called his son, yet determined to protect humanity at all costs. The clash reached its inevitable crescendo. Horus, consumed by rage and the gifts of chaos, unleashed a final, cataclysmic assault, one that would have shattered worlds if allowed to continue. And yet, in the moment that would define the galaxy, the Emperor made a choice, a sacrifice that would save humanity but cost him immeasurably. With unthinkable power, he struck Horus down, ending the Warmaster's rebellion but sustaining grievous wounds that left him mortally maimed, trapped upon the Golden Throne to preserve the Imperium from complete collapse. The galaxy's savior had become a living relic, a symbol of hope and suffering intertwined. The legions, stunned by the outcome, were left to reckon with the destruction, the horrors, and the betrayals they had witnessed. The heresy had claimed the lives of countless heroes, shattered legions, and left the Imperium scarred in ways that could never be healed. Victory had been won, but at a cost that echoed across generations. In the aftermath, the Imperium survived, yet it was forever changed. Systems lay in ruin, the loyalist legions mourned the brothers they had lost, and the shadow of chaos lingered in every corner of the galaxy. Humanity endured, but the illusion of perfection was gone. The heresy had revealed a stark truth: even the mightiest, most loyal heroes could fall, and the darkness of ambition and corruption could reach even into the hearts of gods. The galaxy rebuilt, but the scars remained. Tales of heroism, tragedy, and betrayal were whispered across worlds, a reminder that vigilance is eternal and that trust is fragile. The Emperor remained upon the Golden Throne, a silent guardian, and the specter of Horus lingered as a warning, that the forces of chaos and ambition never rest, and that the struggle for humanity's soul is never truly over. In the end, the Horus Heresy was not just a war, it was a lesson etched in blood and fire, a grim reality that no victory could erase, and a shadow that would haunt the galaxy for millennia to come. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.